Hey, welcome back to Portable Entrepreneur. I know many of you are very interested in a lot of what we've been talking about here recently with owning website assets. These are the websites that produce you income month after month. They grow in value over time and as you build them up. And so I was thinking to myself, since one of two of my favorite parts of this process is actually putting together growth plans. That is looking at a single idea and figuring out how can we actually make this reality? How can we build an audience or traffic? And of course, start bringing in some revenue for the site. I figured, why don't I share this process with you so you can start using this similar process with your own websites. Now, here recently, I let you watch over my shoulder as I created a brand new WordPress website. And my goal there was to show you how I use this free theme to create websites that Google loves because they load really fast. They pass their new updates that are coming up. And so it gives you a bit of a head start before you even get started adding content to your website. But in that video, together we created this brand new website. It has no traffic, no audience, no revenue at all whatsoever. So I thought, why don't we use this as an example for how we can put together a growth plan for a brand new website so that this could actually be turned into a real income producing website. So that is exactly what I've done. I've spent a little bit of time putting together this growth plan and I have it here to share with you. So I'm going to show you exactly what the growth plan looks like. It is simple yet straightforward. And as we go through this growth plan together, if you see ideas that you think will work for your own website, feel free to steal those ideas. But hopefully this gets your thought process going as to how this really works. So even if the website you are working on or you want to work on or you're considering working on is different than the type of website that we are actually going to be creating a growth plan for, this is really to get you seeing the process that I use and what I'm thinking about before I just sit down and start whipping together this growth plan. So I'm going to show you what goals I'm looking at and the phases that we go through with this process. So let's go ahead and jump over and let's start looking at this growth plan. Okay, so here we are on the website, and I just wanted to make sure that you were able to see the website and have an understanding of what this website is about. That way, the growth plan is going to make a little more sense for you. So this website is called DC Family Deals, and the goal of it is simply to get Facebook Messenger subscribers. That way they can be sent a weekly message about local deals that are all about having fun with their family. So that is the entire purpose of this website. So since it is specific to a local area, then everything is going to be targeted around that. So that is the website. So let's jump over here to the growth plan now. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit so you can see this a little bit better, hopefully. Now we have a few things that are going on here, and I'm going to go through all of this with you. But the first thing that I'm really looking at here are two phases of any idea. The first one I call the startup phase, and this is simply, what is it that we can do? Literally, what is the minimum that we can do to go from idea to start building up our audience as quickly as possible to getting in some initial revenue as quickly as possible? Anything that is longer term, that is harder, that would be nice but is not essential, that all goes into the next phase, which is what I call the expansion phase. So with this, I am setting two goals. I am setting what is my startup goal first off, and then beyond that, what is my expansion goal? So this is where I really want to start with the end in mind. When you start with the end in mind, this is what is it that you actually want out of this process? You are the one putting in time. You might even be putting in a little bit of money, even though these don't tend to be too expensive to actually start. But this is your effort that's going into this. So only you can decide what is it that you ultimately want out of this. So this is not only for you in thinking about how much revenue do you actually want this to make? How much time do you want to be able to dedicate to this every week? So when you understand what is it that you want out of what you're doing, then it's going to be easier for you to not only pick the ideas in terms of the websites to build or to acquire, it's also going to be easier for you to put together a growth plan or pick the strategies that are going to meet what you want out of this. So that is always where I want to start. So I'm also looking at what is going to be my start date for this. So let's say I'm going to be coming up with a specific start date for this. And then what is my startup goal? So you can really break this goal down. And sometimes we really expand on this a little bit more depending on the number of things that we need to do to make a website actually work. So for instance, this can be a startup goal in terms of subscribers or revenue, but really we got to get that audience going a little bit before the revenue tends to happen. So for me, for the startup goal, we want to be able to get in 1,000 Facebook Messenger subscribers. And what is our startup target end date? So it's a target. It might happen, it might not, but what is it ideally that we want to target? And I like to have this within my initial goals of my startup phase, because if we have a target date, then when we start looking at the strategies, this is how I'm going to grow it, then we can say, okay, well, in order to use that strategy to meet that specific goal by this specific date, here's what we need to make happen every single week, or now every single day. And then we can look at, okay, well, is that strategy going to work to actually get us there? And if it's not, do we need to pick a different strategy? Do we need to pick a different date? What needs to change in order to make that realistic? So this is why we always got to know what we want out of this and be able to come up with our target goals. So let's say we want to be able to get to 1,000 subscribers. And let's say we want to be able to do that in 45 days. So let's say we're going to go with May 15th for that. So that's what we're going to start with. Now, when we get beyond that, that's when we're going into the expansion phase. So that means we need to meet that startup goal before we consider anything else in the expansion phase. So oftentimes I just let this sit. I don't necessarily come up with a goal, but I do come up with what is it that I really ultimately want to happen. So when this site does get some initial audience and this site does start bringing in some revenue, what do I want to have happen beyond that? Okay. So we might say, okay, we really want to be able to get to 10,000 subscribers. But of course, once we hit that, then we're going to want to get to 25,000 subscribers. So we're going to want to keep going. So there's always going to be a series of expansion that is just going to continue over time. But we may wait on what that date is, but I want to have a concrete goal for my startup phase. And then I do want to have an idea of where I would really like to go in the expansion phase. But, we do want to be able to build up to at least 25,000 Facebook subscribers, which we absolutely think is possible here. So that's where we start here, is looking at what are our goals. Now, next up, we look at what are our growth phases. Now, a growth phase is what do we need to grow to make this site really ultimately work? And sometimes you're going to have different phases, but mostly you're going to fall into two phases, which is what we have here. And this is our audience, or in this case, subscriber growth. And this is our revenue growth phase. So the first one, this can be your traffic. Do you require traffic to your website? Do you just need a list? Do you just need an audience or subscribers of some sort? And it's figuring out how are we actually going to grow that. Then in the next phase, once we have the audience, having an audience always makes monetizing a site much easier, of course. Then we can consider how are we actually going to grow this and monetize it, right? So let's start out with looking at subscriber growth for this particular site. Now, when you're looking at an audience, let's say, for instance, real quick, you have a website that is a marketplace. So now when you are looking at subscriber growth, you actually have to attract two audiences, buyers and sellers. And then you have to figure out how are you going to monetize it. So I say this because I want you to think about the type of site that you are interested in creating or that you have, and how this may differ a little bit. But typically you're going to fall into these two phases of growth. So subscriber growth. Let's look at the ideas we have here. Now you're going to notice that we have a couple of sections here, a couple of columns. The first is the description, just describing what is the growth strategy. We have the responsible party, when we will be starting that particular strategy, and then we can note when we've completed it so we can see how long it took us, and if we need to add any notes to further expand on that idea or any ideas that we've had on that particular strategy, we can do so there. Now, I did skip over these few columns, which I want to note. This is time, difficulty, and impact. So some of you may have one or two ideas for how you are going to gain subscribers. I tend to be an idea person. I have lots of ideas. And so if I'm coming up with 10, 15, 20 different ideas, then we really need to rate those ideas to make sure that we are spending our time, especially in the beginning, doing what is going to be the biggest impact. So I really like to find a balance between how much time are we spending on this and what kind of impact is this going to make. So here we are scoring these on a scale of 1 to 5. With time, that's going to be the least amount of time for a 1 and the most amount of time being a 5. Same thing with difficulty and impact. So with difficulty is how hard is this to actually implement this strategy? And with impact, what kind of impact is this going to make? Is this really going to help us get to our goal? Or is this just going to make like a small dent in the numbers we're trying to hit? So the first strategy we're looking at is to set a launch date. And the idea here is we don't want to have to go out and be sourcing all of these deals and be putting all of this together if we don't really have many subscribers to do that for. Now, we're going to need to do that even when we have maybe 50 subscribers, and that's perfectly okay. But if we can generate some excitement, like, oh, hey, we got some big deals coming your way. This is going to be amazing. The first one's going to hit on this specific date. Then we can get people talking more about it. We can hopefully get people sharing this more so that we build up the anticipation, which is going to help build up the subscriber list. So that's what we're going to do. Now, over here in the notes, a couple of things we've talked about is asking subscribers to share. So, okay, you have now subscribed. Yay, you're going to get these deals coming your way here really soon. Do you know anybody else near you? Do you have friends? Do you have colleagues, any family in this local area? Because very likely they do. And then they can go ahead and share this site and they can look really great because other people are going to be able to enjoy those deals. So we want to make sure that sharing is a big part of this. We've even considered, could we incentivize this at all? Could we offer to send them early access to some deals or maybe to some exclusive deals that are only for people who have shared this with others or some others type of bonus that would be very simple for us to be able to deliver upon? So that's one thing that we're considering. Now, the next one is actually, and this is going to happen a few times in this list, is one of my all-time favorite strategies. And if you only have one site, this isn't going to happen. But again, I want you to see what happens as you continue on with this strategy. And this is what I call audience borrowing. So as you start building up a portfolio of these websites, and as some tend to be similar, they're not the same, but they share a common audience, even if it's two different topics, then you're able to take site number 1 and promote it now to your new site, site number 2. And then you can take site number 2 and be able to promote that back to site number 1. And see, this is how you're able to borrow an audience from one of your own portfolio sites and send them over to another one. So in this case, there is a website in the portfolio that has a relevant audience. And so they have a newsletter. So we're going to put ad space in that newsletter for this particular site. Now, they also have social media accounts. So now we can go to those social media sites and say, hey, we have this brand new deal for you. Come check this site out over here and sign up. So now all of the hard work that you did with your first site now makes site 2 and even site 3 so much easier because you just borrow the audience and you start getting some free promotions that way. So that is why we've said this is one of the easiest things to implement, the least difficult thing to do, and it's going to make a bit of an impact. We may even be able to bump some of these here up to a 4. Now, some other things that we can do that are going to take a little bit more time, but this is also where you can start if you don't have any sites, is to start outreaching here. So there are a lot of DC sites that talk to families specifically, give them ideas of things to do. So being able to go to those different sites and say, hey, we have something completely free. We're not selling to your audience. We just share these great deals in your area. Would you be willing to share this in your newsletter, in your social media? And asking them to do that, and hopefully even getting a few of them to do that could make a really big difference. It's going to take a little bit more time because we would need to come up with a list of all of the different groups. We need to find the admins, a way to contact them, and actually outreach and to manage the responses and follow up and all of that. Now, there are also a lot of local mom groups like there are in a lot of areas. So being able to track down those, being able to contact the admins, do the same thing, saying, hey, we have this really cool site. Thought you might be interested in sharing it with your audience. Another thing we can do is actually getting into the group and having other moms who are local in that area or someone from a family in that area be able to go into these groups and share it themselves and say, hey, we found this really cool site. This is something you should check out to get great deals for your family. Everyone is about saving money, so it's pretty easy to be able to promote something like that. Now, another thought is to be able to take the portfolio site and to write a post and say something about how to save money in your area or how to find local deals and list this site as an option. And since again, people love to be able to save money, especially on things that they want to go out and do anyway, being able to put these ideas together and then take that piece of content and again, going back and sharing it with these different audiences, publishing it on social media and different newsletters and getting the word out that way. So these are some of the ways that we can absolutely grow the site and we don't have to wait for SEO. We don't have to write up all of this content. The idea is to really keep the website itself very small and be able to use these strategies just to pull in as many subscribers as possible and not have to worry about content and SEO. So when you're sitting down and if you have a list like this, really this is where we want to sort this by which of these is going to be easiest to do and is going to have the biggest impact. So being able to go over to our portfolio site is going to have the biggest impact and with the least amount of effort. So that's where we want to start. Other than that, we can start looking at some of these. Okay, well, we can join these groups and just go in and start participating and sharing this and seeing what kind of sign up that we can get. But this is where, especially in the beginning, as we're implementing these strategies, we want to also be looking at how well is this actually working? How many subscribers are we getting from these different sources? And that way we can see, well, we've been spending this amount of time and this is the result that we've been getting. So after we've been doing this for a month or so, we can say, you know what, this strategy we're trying, we're getting some subscribers, but it's not really making the impact. So let's just not focus on that for now. And let's spend all that extra time now in this other strategy over here that we're not spending as much time in, but we're getting big numbers in terms of subscribers. Okay, so now our audience is coming in. We're starting to build that up. So now this is where we can look at, okay, if we have a minimum of 1,000 subscribers, now we can at least start offering some cheap advertising to these potential companies. And as the list continues to grow, well, then the advertising prices can continue to increase because, well, now we're going to put you in front of more eyes. So if right now we are promoting you to 1,000 people, well, now we are promoting you to 3,000 people, to 5,000 people, now to 10,000 people. So as the list continues to increase, so does the amount that you are charging. So one of the things that has been discussed is to promote deals for free to attract some new advertisers. And this really could even be for an audience growth. The advertisers are going to be people in companies in this local area. So they themselves have families. So they're probably going to be interested in deals themselves and are going to sign up. But also being able to go to these advertisers and say, hey, we're doing this for free right now. We are new and we're trying to help get the word out. We would love to feature you at no cost. And that way we are starting to build some relationships with people and we're starting to get in some great deals so that when we have an audience to promote to, we actually have some deals to be able to send their way. And that keeps them engaged and interested in what we're going to be sending them week after week. Now, one of the biggest things that we can do, which is what I talked about earlier in subscriber growth, is, as I called audience borrowing, we're going to do advertiser borrowing. So in our portfolio site number 3, that also uses advertisers. So now we're going to be able to go to those advertisers and say, hey, now there is this other site over here. So now you were paying to be promoted over here. Well, this is something very different. And now you can be promoted over here as well. And so now we already have the names, we have the websites, we have the phone numbers, the email addresses of the people who have advertising in all of these companies who handle advertising in all of these companies. Now all we got to do is say, hey, we already know you spend money on advertising. So come over here and spend some money on advertising. So that makes it really, really easy. Now, as a strategy, assuming that we didn't have that list at all, because that is where it makes the most sense to start when you have a portfolio. But let's say that you don't. So this strategy would be to outreach to businesses who are advertising on local sites. So you think about some of the deal sites like the Groupon and Living Social and these big sites like that. Or even there's some of these smaller sites that are out there that we see them maybe advertising on a sidebar. But these are all the companies that we know are paying for advertising right now. And we can say, hey, we know that you're paying over there, but if you come over here and advertise, we can give you a better deal and you're getting right inside people's Facebook inbox. So they're going to see this deal. So that is a great way to be able to continue to build up that audience. And just as a little tidbit, if you have this portfolio, and let's say you are using this outreach method for getting in some of these advertisers, and now you have new advertisers that weren't from your other portfolio site that you've now gained from this new one. Well, now you can say, hey, you're advertising here. Great. Well, hey, you should definitely go over here and check out this other portfolio site and consider advertising there. So see, you can really start exchanging the audiences, be it subscribers or your advertisers, or even with your revenue as you start having things to promote, and you can cross promote it in that way. So this is really our startup growth strategy. And it's actually pretty simple and straightforward. We've rated it so that we know where to start. We know who's going to be responsible for it. We are going to assign specific start dates and then assign dates that we are going to have these things done, and then continue to track the impact of all of this so we can see. So from day one, our goal is we're just forgetting revenue. We need subscribers. We cannot have any revenue unless we have those subscribers. So we're going to go hard on these things right here in this list. So while we could really double the number of things that we have on this list, there is really no point in doing that, because that just really paralyzes us from being able to take action on all of these items. We really have to focus in on what is going to make the most impact, is going to be the simplest and the fastest for the team or even you as an individual to be able to do, so that it happens and it gets done. Then we can always evaluate and go from there. Now, as this site continues to grow, we get further into the expansion phase, then it really opens the door to even more revenue strategies that we'd be able to implement, from different products of our own to be able to promote, to now opening up an email list that can promote different things, to have different advertisers there itself, to be able to build up a social media profile that has a following, has an audience there where we're able to post deals, and then we're able to actually sell some of the posts and advertise in that way. So all of this can happen, and this can continue to grow and grow. But again, we want to start with what is the minimum that we can do to go from idea to actually have an audience so we can start monetizing. So let me know down in the comments below if you found this helpful, or if you got any ideas from this. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for spending your time here with me. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. If you know anyone else who would find this helpful, please do consider sharing this with them. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on more videos that I have coming your way just like this. Thank you again for watching. I'll catch you next time.